The Torah reading this week is Parshat Chaye Sarah, and in it we record the death of both Sarah and Abraham. Sarah passing away at the age of 127, and Abraham passing away at the age of 175. And we also note the shidduch, the finding of a match for Yitzchak and Rivka joining him, and hence it's seen as a transition onto the next generation, the second generation of the founding families of the Jewish people. The title of this class is Life After Life, and I wanted to begin by taking note of something in the news. On September 3rd, a little bit more than 2 months ago, there was a parade in China attended by Putin and Xi and Zhang Yun, the three of the major despots of the world. And at a moment when they were talking to one another through translators and the microphone was on, they were overheard talking about the technology that would enable longevity and for people to live forever. And the Chinese leader was talking about the idea that he thought in this century, people would live to be 150 years old. There'd be transplants and ways of changing out organs. And this is what they were talking about at a moment when they were walking together, thinking that they were being unheard. And of course, it was at the very time, it was the beginning of the month of Elul, when we, the Jewish people, were preparing for Rosh Hashanah, for the Day of Judgment. And as we say in the prayers, that we say, Sifrei HaChaim b'Sifrei HaMeitim Ketuchim Lefanov. In our minds, we envision books open, and specifically according to this Medrash, the book that contains the listing of all of the living people to be judged, and also the book containing the names of all the people who have already passed away, who are also going to be judged. So it's obvious that there's a clash of attitudes here. And it makes perfect sense when you think about it. I mean, I can't imagine these three despots looking forward to facing their maker and giving an accounting for the decisions that they've made during their lifetimes. And by the same token for us, I can't imagine us at a pivotal moment in our lives imagining and evoking a sense that we could live forever and that perhaps our mortal lives would be everlasting. And of course, there's a big philosophical issue going on there. There's a big practical issue in terms of how we perceive the responsibility for using the gift of life. And more so than that even, there's a sense of what it means to have a belief in Hashem and to believe that life itself is a gift from Hashem. As we say every morning when we wake up, Elokai neshama shenatata bi, we say, God, you literally have returned my soul to me one day at a time. And you did so b'chemla, with a great deal of compassion, and rabba emunatecha, and entrusting each one of us to utilize the gift of life in a meaningful way. And indeed, that's the way our parsha begins, when it notes, that Sarah lived to be 100 years and 20 years and 7 years, and we all remember the Rashi stating the fact that Sarah's qualities and the pristine makeup of her spiritual being was such that it was completely uncorrupted, that it was untouched by life. And that therefore she passed away at a moment when she was clearly having completed her God-given mission on the earth. And that's an important idea to remember. And just to develop this perspective a little bit more, what does the Torah tell us right in the beginning? It's on page 106 in the Stone Chumash, the beginning of chapter 23 in Bereshit. It says, that Vatama Sarah passed away by Yavo Avram had to come, so he wasn't in the same place. Hence we have the idea that he was returning from the Akedah, from offering Yitzchak. And he came, Lispod l'Sarah v'liv kota. He came to eulogize Sarah, and he came to cry over her passing. And many commentaries, many Mefarshim explain that it should be reversed. But first you cry, and then you compose yourself and you formulate a eulogy. And I think one of the perspectives I just want to highlight for the purpose of this class is that Avram's appreciation for his wife Sarah, beyond his personal relationship, but in terms of the Lech Lecha mission, the going forth mission that was entrusted to him and to Sarah and to his household, to have an impact on the world and to change the trajectory of the world and to bring as many people as possible Tachat Kanfei HaShechina, under the wings of divine influence, as Rashi describes it. So therefore, I think what we can understand here is that whatever personal loss Avram was dealing with, the Torah here is recording his public loss, so to speak. He came to lispod l'Sarah. He came to make it clear and to articulate and express what an amazing loss to humanity and to the world the passing of Sarah was. And then we could all cry over this loss as human beings in terms of appreciating the tremendous value of what her life meant to the world, and in keeping with the title of this class, Life After Life, and in appreciation of the continuing impact after her mortal life that Sarah would have on the world. And indeed, we call Sarah Imenu. We call her a matriarch, and it's interesting, but she lived 127 years, but she had her first child when she was 90. So clearly the vast majority of her years on earth, she was childless, but yet she's still a matriarch, not just because she's the mother of Yitzchak, but because her entire attitude was that of a mother trying to give life, trying to foster life, trying to impact human beings in a unique, personal way, as only she was able to do. So that's the setting. And that's probably the first response we would have to these three gentlemen if we were one of the interpreters and we were there in the midst of them and they were talking about their hopes to live 150 years or more. We would tell them, hey guys, it's probably not in the cards. And as a matter of fact, when God judges the world, God judges each and every human being. We each pass before God in this moment on the Yom Hadin. We have many opportunities to make amends, to do teshuvah, to reapproach God, to reconsider what we've done during our lifetimes. And then even the judgment for those people who are no longer in the world revolves exclusively around what is their continuing impact on the world for tov, for good, or for not so good. And that rebalances their books, so to speak, and changes their place vis-a-vis God in the world to come. We're going to, for the purpose of this class, skip the bulk of the Parsha, which has to do with finding Rivka, with Eliezer, Avram's servant, being sent out to find a proper spouse for Yitzchak, with Abraham understanding full well that it would require someone as great as Sarah in her own right to be able to join together with Yitzchak and carry forward the family business, which was bringing people under the wings of Hashem and making Hashem manifest in the world. After that's done, we turn to chapter 25, and it starts on page 120 in the Stone Chumash. And the highlights are rather surprising, because many commentaries say that the moment that Sarah died, Avram ceases to become an active player in the world. But yet the Torah seems to be pushing against that. Vayosef Avraham vayikach isha ushmo keturah. Avram proceeded, it's an interesting way of putting it, but the truth is he added on. His legacy was not done. And he took a wife, and he had 6 children with that wife. And the narrative goes on. And he distributed to his children, I'll just give a few highlights that we're going to discuss. Everything that Avram possessed, he gave to Yitzchak, and to the other children he gave presents. And the comment, Rashi asked the question, if he gave everything to Yitzchak, what did he have left to give to the other children? And the answer is that he gave everything to Yitzchak, meaning the full import of the legacy, the spiritual legacy of Lech Lecha, that God will make his name great, that God will bless him in every way, that those who curse him will be cursed, and that he should be known throughout the world and have an impact on the world. That's the sense of legacy that Avram gives to Yitzchak. And the other, he distributed his material items accordingly. Then the Torah notes in sentence 5, Avram dies, and it says unusual language, Vayigvay Avamas Avram. Avram died, Beseva Tova Zakein V'Saveya. He was mature, he was content, he lived a full life. I would point out that according to Rashi, he died 5 years prematurely because, to get the chronology straight, Yaakov and Esav were already born, and God spared him seeing Esav go off to become the tremendously evil person that he became. But in any event, the Torah takes note of the fact that he was mature and content, and that he was buried by both Yitzchak and Yishmael, it says in sentence 10 there. And then it says, unusually, that Hashem blessed Vayivorech Elokim et Yitzchak beno. And after Abraham was dead, that's when God gave blessings to Yitzchak. So right away, this stands out as an anomaly in the Torah, because after all, what did Yaakov do before he died? He gave blessings. What did Yitzchak, what are we going to read about with Yitzchak? The contentiousness between his two twin boys over the blessings, and the ruse engineered by Rebekah to see to it that the blessings ended up in the hands of Yaakov. And we find Yaakov giving blessings the day he dies. We find Moshe at the last day of his life giving blessings, each according to the nature and the welfare of the person that's receiving the blessing. And here we see that after Avram dies, that's when the blessings take place. So let's look at these anomalies, all contained here in chapter 25, and certainly recommended that you read through the chapter on your own, page 120, 121 of the Stone Chumash. So first of all, what's the deal that Avram, taking note of the fact that he was satisfied, B'seva Tova, the ripe old age, Zakein V'Soveya, content, mature and content. So the Ramban says that don't think that this description of Avram was based on the circumstances of his life, because his life was very challenging. He had the 10 tests he had to go through. He had tremendous opposition, literally from the day he was born, to prevailing giving out the message that he had. So the Ramban, Nachmanides, singles out the idea that this praise of Abraham, this hesped given by God about Abraham, is meant to highlight the fact that he really was satisfied with whatever God gave him. God made many, many promises to him, and those promises were still very far in the distance when he leaves the world. God also had him foresee tremendous suffering and enslavement of the Jewish people at the covenant between the parts, and yet he took on the job of becoming the patriarch together with his wife, the matriarch of the Jewish people, to foster the Jewish people, to shape them. So the idea was that Abraham was by nature, not by nature, but by training, a content person, and that he took God's blessings to heart. He trusted in them, but he did so in a way that was without any impatience, without any sense that those blessings belonged to himself, but rather that they belonged to the future of the world and the future of the Jewish people. And that's what the Ramban says here. So this is, in fact, a proper eulogy of Abraham given by God, and it highlights something for us. Don't think that there's any circumstance, don't think that there's any externality that is going to make or break your sense of fulfillment in your life. Understand that it's all going to come from the intensity of your connection to Hashem and from your ability to take all the blessings that God provides for you and to find satisfaction in them. Now, why was there no blessing given? We mentioned that Abram stands out. So here we're going to get into this idea of life after life, because the commentaries, the Medrash explains that Abraham, unlike Yitzchak, when he conveyed blessings to one twin and not to the other, Avram was not willing to single out Yitzchak and give him blessings, knowing that it would hurt the feelings and disturb the well-being of Yishmael. So Avram had this very kind, soft nature, which Yitzchak had also, but different circumstances. We'll see about that over the next couple of weeks. And Avram simply felt, and here's what the Medrash says. Avram said the following to himself: Basar v'dam, I'm a human being. Today I'm here, tomorrow I'm gone. He wasn't like Putin or Jean or young Jung Yoon, who felt as though, well, maybe God will give me hundreds of years to live, and maybe I'll be able to hammer out the future for the world that I see. He understood that everything he did was in partnership with Hashem, that he was a fragile human being. And therefore, he said, I am not going to leave a legacy of animosity between Yishmael and Yitzchak based on my interest in conveying a blessing to the other. Now, this really stands out in contrast to, as we say, what we see in the rest of the Torah. I don't have a great explanation as to why, but the Medrash is very, very clear that this is Abraham's attitude. And what we're going to see next is we're going to look at the Abarbanel. And the Abarbanel, who's a later commentary on the Torah, very interesting man, had a great political career in two different countries, in Spain and in Portugal, and was kicked out of both of them as a Jew. He raises the question, and he says, what is this business of Abraham by Yosef Abraham? Abraham added on, and he took a wife, and he had 6 more children. And he really wonders, what was Abraham thinking? How does this fit in with Abraham's life? After all, we've seen discussions between God and Abraham earlier. If only I could have a child. God says you can have a child with Sarah. That child is going to carry on everything. We know Abraham followed through with that because of the way he singled out the spiritual legacy in terms of conveying it to Yitzchak. We also know with Midrashim that he spent a lot of effort and time to maintain a relationship with Yishmael, even though he knew that historically in the future Yishmael would be an antagonist to the Jewish people, but he did everything he could to be connected to him. But the Abarbanel asks very simply, what was Avram thinking here? Why didn't Avram just, if he really was so content, like the Torah says, why didn't he just have nachas from his one son and see their marriage develop between Rivka and Yitzchak, and see them have twins, and see those twins being raised up for the 15 years that he would be alive when they were alive? What was he thinking? And here the Abarbanel, and his style to give innovative ideas, some of which he draws from Midrashim, some of which I don't know where he gets it from. But I'm going to look at 4 reasons he gives to explain what Avram was doing. And I think each of these reasons relate to Avram's attitude toward his role within God's world as a fragile human being. The first reason he says, after all, when God changed his name from Avram to Avraham, God said you're going to be the father of a multitude of nations. And 2, Yishmael and Yitzchak, does not make a multitude. And therefore, Avram felt as though Hashem has placed a blessing out there for me to seize, and for me to passively let that go and say, I've done my part already, and my wife has passed away, I'm in retirement. He understood, according to the Abarbanel's explanation, that he needed to continue having a deep, lasting impact on the world. And he saw that part of that plan would be not just educating his son Yitzchak, not just maintaining a distant, faraway relationship with Yishmael, because Yishmael lived in a different place, but it also meant bringing additional children into the world that he could mentor, that he could guide, and who in fact would become nations in their own right. So he followed through on that blessing. Another aspect the Abarbanel says, Kove Hashem lo yachlifu koach. Says when a person is enamored, when a person is filled with forward-looking energy, knowing that Hashem holds out such great promise for the world, then the person has unending energy and opportunity to make a difference. And he says, after all, the whole history here of the difficulty of having children and everything else that went on, it was Avram's intense interest as a fragile human being to say to himself that God is yet giving me life, and I need to use that life for the benefit of the future of God's world. And one thing I can do, which attaches itself to a promise that God made to me, is I could bring additional children into the world. And it's noteworthy because the Abarbanel himself points out the fact that we just finished a parsha where they had to choose Rivka, and Eliezer had to travel back to the place that he lived, and because he needed a person who had certain lineage attached back to his, going back to Shem and going back to Aver, going back to the child and grandchild, great-grandchild of Noach. And yet here he marries Keturah. We don't know who she is. Some people say she's Hagar, other people say she wasn't. But in any event, he wasn't that particular in this regard. And I'm not sure what the Abarbanel mentions that. I'm not sure where he's going with it. But I think he wants to say the idea that Avram understood that at this point in his life and in the trajectory of the world, he really had done his heavy lifting. And therefore, the standard wasn't going to be the same. But as a person whose hopes rested in God, he still felt he had to do his part. Then he goes on to very interesting things. He says the third reason was Avram was concerned for the future of humanity. Very interesting concern, because we see it today. The Abarbanel did live in right around 1500. Got kicked out of Spain in 1492. He says that Avram was very concerned that if he died, having had one child with Hagar and one child with Sarah, he was setting up a future debate as to which of these two children really counted the most. It's an interesting idea because we know that there are quite a few people alive today who are Muslim who really feel as though that the whole Torah was skewed in the wrong direction and it was goofed up by the Jews somehow. I'm not sure exactly what their belief is, but that in fact Ishmael was the cherished son of Abraham. So according to the Abarbanel, perhaps anticipating this, perhaps seeing it even in his own lifetime, although he lived in Christian Europe and not Muslim Europe at that time. But he says that Abraham felt the need to bring more children into the world so it would be clear that there was only one child that remained with him, even in his own age. And he fleshes this out. Normally, people are very attached to children they have in their old age. They want these children to be around them, take care of them, help them. And we see Abraham did the opposite. He sent away everybody. Only Yitzchak remained in his household. Only Yitzchak remained present in the life of Abraham. And by sending away not only Ishmael, who had been sent away all those years before at the behest of Sarah, but by now giving presents and sending away these additional 6 children, he was demonstrating once and for all the fact that only Yitzchak was the true spiritual heir of the Jewish people. Be an interesting thing to sit down with a group of imams and try to debate this section of the Torah and see what they make of it. But Abarbanel, in any event, this is what he makes of it. He also says something else. And again, this is very forward-looking, because we described that Abraham did not give blessings out explicitly because he didn't want to create a future of animosity. He said, I'm only a fragile human being. I'll leave blessings in the future up to God. But yet he also took upon himself, he said the following, that perhaps Ishmael's animosity towards Sarah as the matriarch of the Jewish people, who did tell Abraham to send away Hagar and Ishmael and get them out of the house, could be relieved by he himself having additional children and sending them away, and therefore making it clear that any event, any idea of sending people out of the house of Abraham and Sarah or out of his own house was only meant to ensure the fact that the education and the development of Yitzchak would be protected. And it had no ulterior motive. It had no personal motive. And in this way, Yishmael could become more accommodated to his lot in life, and having been born to the maidservant of Sarah, a Pilegesh of Abraham, and then having been sent away at the behest of Sarah, leaving the household, albeit knowing that throughout his life his father took great pains to travel to him once a year, to connect with him, to educate him, and to help him live the best life that he could live. So let's see some conclusions here. I think the biggest conclusion here is trying to understand the balance in Pirkei Avot in chapter 2, Mishnah 16. It says famously, Lo alecho hamalacha ligmor, it's not up to you to finish the task. Ve'ein ata ben chorin lipoter mimen, but neither are you permitted to just walk away and feel as though I'm free from any obligation. And I think this is the balance we see about Abraham here, that Abraham threaded the needle. He was totally content with whatever God had given him, with leaving the world with this one child, and then seeing that one child have two twins, still a very fragile thread hanging on to the legacy of the Abraham in the world. And at the same time, he was proactive and active in trying to calm down any future disputes and really make the world a happier, more peaceful place as far into the future, as far down the horizon as he could possibly envision. The fact that he was always looking ahead, it gives us a different explanation for Tikkun Olam. That Tikkun Olam is beyond being an altruistic person. Tikkun Olam is really thinking, again, we don't have the greatness of an Abraham, but really calibrating our decisions. What impact do we have on ourselves? What impact do we have on the world? Just as we said when he eulogized Sarah, he eulogized her from the perspective of, look what a magnificent impact she's had on mankind and will continue to have on mankind throughout history. It means that to the greatest possible extent, Tikkun Olam isn't putting out fires or covering up or trying to smooth out disputes. Tikkun Olam is really saying that, yes, I am a fragile human being. Yes, my days on earth are limited to those that God bestows upon me. However, it's up to me to stay in the game and to do everything I can within the limitations of a human being. And the final reference is this. It's from a medrash. I wouldn't have never seen this medrash. It was quoted by Avi Finkelstein in a class he gave 3 years ago. But the first chapter of Tehillim, of Psalms, is a very beautiful psalm. We read it at funerals oftentimes, ties in with this theme of life after life. But we talk about the vision for a righteous person, how a righteous person could become analogous to a tree planted by a fresh flowing stream that forever has a source of nourishment and growth and has can go on forever, so to speak. And in that, it says as following. It says, Pirio yitain bito, fruits will come and go. And it says that's a reference to Yishmael. Yishmael had a legacy from Abraham. Yishmael, we have to give them their due. They are monotheistic people. They cling to the faith in one God. However, they construe that. And therefore, Yishmael represents the fruit of a great tree. Sometimes it comes out good, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it's plentiful, sometimes it's scarce. But it's still fruit coming from a tree. Then it says, Oleu lo yibol. The leaves will never fall away. And that it says is Yitzchak. All right, we know trees do shed their leaves, some trees don't. I'm not sure exactly what the reference is in the Psalm, but it means that Yitzchak is going to be the constant source of spiritual renewal and vision and nourishment for the world. And that, of course, is what we each have to strive to provide for the world. And then it says, V'cho asher ya'aseh yatzliach, everything undertaken, says in Psalms, will have success. And interestingly, the Medrash says those are the B'nai Keturah. Those refer to these final 6 children that Avram had. how do we understand that final reference? Because we don't know much about these people. What we can understand is the following, that because it was Abram's intention to act upon a blessing that God had bestowed upon him, Av Hamon Goyim, you will be the father of many nations, and that was Abram's motivation, it fits in with this whole vision of the tree being nourished by an ever fresh, ever flowing stream of water, always replenishing itself, always being able to renew, always being able to provide shade through the leaves upon the tree, and then understanding that some of the things we undertake will bear delicious fruit, and sometimes the fruit won't be so wonderful. In some situations, we won't be able to bestow blessing because we don't want the blessing to settle on a person like Ishmael who doesn't deserve it, so therefore we'll bring no blessing. And at other times, we will undertake action. Lo olecha hamalacha ligmor. We too, in our own lives, can strive to thread this needle and balance out our understanding that, unlike Putin and Xi and Zhang Yun, we don't expect to live forever. We revel in the fact that God gives us our soul back each and every day, that God entrusts life in our hands, gives us an opportunity to exercise our free choice, to supplement and augment the fundamental work that Abram and Sarah accomplished in the world. And please God, we should do so in a balanced way, which reflects a Jewish attitude toward life and a Jewish attitude towards the value of life and the mortality with which we all have to cope. And in that sense, we can read the Parsha of Chaye Sarah as one in which a great generation of Avram and Sarah comes to a conclusion, and a great generation of Yitzhak and Rivka undertakes to carry that legacy forward, which we know has been preserved throughout history. And please God, we should live our lives the same way with God's help.